Today we are continuing our series on love, caring, and compassion. And the title of the talk today is Accepting What Is. So when we think about accepting what is, to me that begs two questions. The first is, are we talking about accepting what is our human experience? And the second question, are we talking about accepting what is our spiritual truth? Two good questions, right? So, let's look at both of them. Because as we dig into this, I think there's a lot that we can all learn. And what we'll probably learn is we need to stop, step back, breathe, and be open. There's some wisdom, a lot of wisdom in that song. Thank you, Robert, for sharing. Accepting what is our human experience allows us to see ourselves through the eyes of love. Acceptance, when we accept ourselves and what is showing up in our lives, it allows us to love ourselves enough to look at that, to allow it to be and not fight against it. I have heard many times the saying, what you resist persists. And that is so true. If you think about your life, whenever there's something that you don't want, and so you resist this, whatever it is, you need to make a change, you need to do something, and you really don't want to do it, and so you keep thinking, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. Well, what happens? It grows bigger and bigger and bigger in our minds, doesn't it? And then when you finally have stepped back enough and you're breathing, you can step into it and do whatever it is. Maybe it's balancing your checkbook. And it's this big to do until finally, it's like today's the day, I'm going to do it. And when you have that acceptance, you can move right forward, can't you? Whatever it is that you need to do. So we look at that. Whatever we resist persists. So here's a funny example for you. Maybe you'll think it's funny. I didn't. Many of you know that we are fostering a greyhound for the Colorado Greyhound Rescue. And so our greyhound we've had for going on 3 weeks now, I think is, most of the greyhounds come from Florida. I think he's still on Florida time because he's been waking up at 4 in the morning and ready to play. Doesn't really need to go outside, just wants to play, wants some attention. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm not a morning person, and that is a little too early for me. So, we have worked with him, which means I have gotten out of bed and laid on the floor to keep him quiet for another couple hours, to teach him that he needs to sleep a little longer. So we're making progress. Several days this week he has slept till 6:30. So we're excited. But one night this week, 2 o'clock in the morning, he starts vocalizing. The dog doesn't bark. He'll just go, oh, 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 oh. Like he's talking to you, please help me. And so Tom and I are resisting doing anything. We're laying in bed as quiet as we can, pretending we're asleep, so that he can go back to sleep. Didn't work. He kept vocalizing. Finally, he gets up and he's marching around between the bedroom and the bathroom, and then he started this weird stuff of trying to crawl into the bathtub. It's like, what are you doing? Get out of there. And he just would not calm down. I tried laying with him, petting him, doing all this stuff, but he just kept marching around and was very nervous. It wasn't his usual. And it occurred to me there was no longer any need to resist. There was a problem, and I needed to address it. So I got dressed, and at 2 in the morning, took him out for a walk. Shortly after getting outside, I realized he had an upset stomach. Is that a nice way to put it? He needed to be outside, and there was a reason why he was acting like he was acting, very strange. So it's like, okay. So we walked for 45 minutes. That gave him a chance to be outside. It also wore him out a little bit. And when I could accept we're going to walk for a while, then the walk went fine. I was in a much better mental state, and when we came back, all three of us could go to sleep and sleep for a while. So if I would, or if we would have continued to resist his needs, we would have ended up waking up to something that we really didn't want to. So when we accept what is in our human conditions there, then we can address that. We can see it through the eyes of love. And that's what I felt like as I was taking the dog out for a walk. It was, how can I love him? How can I do something that he needs? And it became very evident that he needed that walk. The only acceptance there is, only when we accept what is, do we have the possibility to move us forward in a new way. And that's very important to realize, that when we will accept what is, then we're able to move forward in a new way. It might be that you need to accept the job you're in is not your passion. And you need to move into something that gives you more life, more excitement. And Spirit will do that. It might be that your employer decides you don't need to be in the job you're in. That's happened to some people, hasn't it? Companies merge. People lose jobs. Well, guess what? The door is open for something new in life. And if we want to fight against that, push against it, resist it, we're going to have a much more difficult time. Whereas if we accept, okay, this is what's happened. Now, okay, God, what else is there? Because I know it's all you. And there's good things here. So open the door. Show me where to go, what to do. So as we start moving forward, accepting life on life's terms, we would say in 12-step groups, then we get to see new things. We get new opportunities that open up for us. Think about martial arts here. With martial arts, they teach non-resistance. There's much more power in the non-resistance than in fighting someone head-on. So when you accept this is happening, now we can change our focus and move forward in a new way. In his book, Thoughts Are Things, Ernest Holmes said, "It's impossible for you to receive that which your mind refuses to accept. If you desire to receive more, you need to consciously develop the ability to mentally encompass it." So what Ernest is talking about here is the law of mental equivalence. And the law of mental equivalence is whatever we have in our mind, what we see in our mind, is what's going to show up in our world. If we see this change in our life, the loss of a job, the diagnosis, the loss of the relationship, as the worst thing, and I will never recover from this, guess what? You won't. But if you see it as, wow, Spirit is moving here. Something good is about to happen. I had a friend that was an expert at this. Anytime something bad happened in her life, she would say, something good is about to happen. She was driving her car down the interstate, blew a tire, sitting on the side of the road. She said, something good is about to happen. She's telling me this, and I thought, you're a little more evolved than me. That couldn't have been my first thought. But that's the way she lived her life. And you know what? The road ranger was there to help her within just a couple minutes. They were able to change out her tire and move her on. Time after time after time, she had that experience in life where she would expect something good is about to happen. Somebody else would be seeing it and saying, oh, crap. She would be saying, wow, something good is about to happen. So what do we expect in life? What are we looking for? What's our mental equivalent? If our mental equivalent is that there's going to be something good here, there's a blessing in this, then that's what we're going to find. And we'll find it much quicker than if we resist it. Sometimes we resist what is. Somebody would come up and say, wow, that's a beautiful blouse you're wearing. And how many times have you said, oh, this old thing, well, I've had this forever. And so you don't accept that compliment. What I find many times is that's related back to our poor self-esteem. And so when we recognize that and accept it, then we can do something about it. We can heal that part of ourselves so that we can accept that compliment from somebody else. And then look at how can we compliment the world? How can we take out our expression of the divine and share that in a way that's going to make it very positive for someone else? When we refuse to accept what is in our lives, it's a way that we lack compassion for ourselves and for others. And if we have no compassion for ourselves, then we're going to limit the amount of compassion we have for others. So it all starts within. That brings me to the next question here is, are we accepting our spiritual truth? And what is the spiritual truth of each one of us? Well, we have many spiritual truths. Take a class, you will learn a bunch of them. But I can tell you that one of the foundational spiritual truths we know here is that Spirit is for us. The universe always has our back. There is good in the universe and we can have it. We are children of the divine. And as that, we are God expressing. Now, we're not the big God that can do all powerful. But there's a lot of power we have because all of the power of God is within us. What I'm trying to say there is all of God is within us, but we are not all of God. God is much broader, much bigger, much more diverse than just one person. But all of the power of God is available to us. And when we see and know that spiritual truth for ourselves, then we can really live a powerful life. We can make changes and not be limited by our thoughts. The opening song, I am free, I am unlimited. There are no chains that bind me. That's when you know your oneness with God. That's when you know your spiritual truth. That God is all there is, and we are one with it. We also get to realize that our human experience is real. I know there are metaphysicians that say this life is not real. But let me just share, from my perspective, your physical life, your human life is real. Now, it's not permanent. Nobody's ever gotten out alive. But your human condition is real. But it's not your spiritual reality. So who we are as spiritual beings is much bigger than just our human condition. And I hope that gives you some hope, some experience there, some way of knowing that there's something greater, that the universe is for you, that good is coming to you, and you can have it. You deserve it in all kinds of ways. In one of our classes, the students just wrote a book. Some of them did. Thank you, Diana. Wrote a paper on diagnosis versus prognosis. Diagnosis. We all know what that is, right? You get the diagnosis. That's what the medical community looks at when they do the exam, they do the test, and they make the diagnosis. Here is what you have. This is what I'm finding. And then you have the prognosis. Whenever we get a diagnosis, we want to know what's the prognosis. So from a medical standpoint, the prognosis is what do people usually end up having happen with this diagnosis? Well, if you take this course of antibiotics, in 14 days you will be healed. If you take this chemotherapy, you will get another 2 years to live. Whatever the normal course of treatment would be. But there is a spiritual prognosis that we don't have to be bound by that medical prognosis. And our spiritual prognosis is what is our mental equivalent. What can we accept for ourselves? Knowing that we are powerful, creative, spiritual beings, that when we live in unity with the one divine God, then our pattern, our programming is wholeness, perfection, health, wealth, abundance, healing. Because that's what Spirit knows. Spirit doesn't know disease. It creates everything that gives life. So our spiritual prognosis is different from a medical prognosis. And we don't have to believe the medical prognosis. Many years ago, maybe not many, a few years ago, I had a spot on my forehead. I may have told you this. And went to the doctor, and they biopsied it and told me it was melanoma. Oh my God, you have cancer. This is melanoma. And so, immediately, I said to myself, because this came up from my heart, I don't have cancer. This is not a part of me. This is just not, it's not right. They can say what they want. They can make their diagnosis. But my prognosis is I am cancer-free. I am fine. Now, I wasn't uninformed, and I did have 2 surgeries on my forehead to remove that, because the first one, they didn't take enough. They didn't have clean margins and didn't check that. So I had to come back and do it again. But I did what I needed to do to take care of the human condition, but I held to my spiritual truth, which was I was cancer-free. I knew that this was not something that was going to kill me. And in knowing that, there was a real peace in my life. I still did what I needed to do. It's one of the things I love about Ernest Holmes. He looked at how science and spirituality walk hand in hand. And he said, if there's a pill, take it. He wasn't coming from that Christian Science background of Mary Baker Eddy that said, God will heal me. I don't believe in going to doctors. I don't believe in taking medicine. He said, God's got enough to do. If there's a pill, take it. So we get to inform ourselves, to be educated. We were given a mind for a reason. We need to use it. Does it always look glowing and wonderful? Not always. It's a human condition. There's just the spiritual truth there. So I had a friend a number of years ago, a dear friend, and she developed liver cancer. And so the doctors told her the diagnosis. They told her the prognosis. And we listened to that. And there was a group of us, several of us that are here today, that got together and did Reiki with this woman. We prayed. Mary attuned us all to doing Reiki with her, and we did Reiki. And through the Reiki treatments and the prayer, she went into remission. And we were elated. And she was too. And she had life, and she was busy living her life. And then she had the cancer come back. And so we gathered together as friends again, and we prayed. And we did Reiki on her. And she died. I was angry. I was angry at God. I was disappointed in myself. Because if I would have prayed harder, maybe she would have lived. I was fighting the fact that she had died. I was not accepting that. It was my failure. I felt responsible. What could I have done? And it wasn't until I started to accept her death that I learned from her husband what a blessing this had been, and how she had had so much healing in her life in these last few months. She had a family that she had been estranged from for years, and she was able to reconcile with her family, and that gave her such peace. And she was ready to move on to her next expression. If I would have continued to not accept her death, blame myself, it wouldn't have been a pretty picture. But when I could accept that this is what is, then I could hear her husband talk about what a blessing this had been in her life, and how the family had come together, and how wonderful this was. He had just lost his wife, but he was so grateful for the healing that she had. And so that was a real lesson to me. No, it doesn't always look pretty. I had one of our students in class say, you know how we say it is what it is? She said, I've changed that. I say, it is what it needs to be. And I like that wisdom. It is what it needs to be. And so I was able to then accept her death, learn from that, and move forward in my life. In his book, Richer Living, Ernest Holmes says, life fills all space and spirit animates every form. But since you are an individual, even spirit cannot make the gift of life unless you accept it. How much life are we willing to accept? Are we willing to live full out? To let people see when we make mistakes? To know that we're not always going to do it right? But we also can make another choice. When we hit that roadblock, we can stop, step back, breathe, and be open to something even better, more fabulous than what we thought it could be. And Spirit will grant that for us. When we can love it all, embrace it all, then we're able to live in new ways. So one final story. I recently heard a man that was describing a vacation he went on. And he was out in the country, in this woods, and it was very rural. And he said on Sunday morning, he went to this little chapel in the woods. He said it was so precious, so cute. And he got there, and there were all these people inside the chapel. And so he went in and he took his seat, and he was waiting. And at 10:30, when the service was supposed to start, he heard all this rustling in the back. And so he turned around and looked, and there was this gentleman coming in the front door. And he walked down the aisle. And when he got to the front, he kind of stumbled. And when he turned around, this guy realized that the person in the front was blind. He turned around and he addressed the audience that was there, talked to them, said an opening prayer. And then he moved over to the organ, where he started playing beautiful organ music. He invited the audience to sing along with him, and he led them in music. And they had a great time of singing. Then he left the organ and he came back to the lectern. He took out a Bible, must have been in Braille, and he read from the Bible. When he finished the passage, he stepped out from behind the lectern and gave the talk for the day. Very powerful. And this man said, I was struck by how this was a one-man show. And the perceived disability of this man being blind did not stop him. He was able to pray. He was able to play the organ, to sing, to read the Bible, to give the talk. He was dynamic. He was powerful. He lived his passion because he accepted exactly who he was and what life had dealt him. He wasn't shrinking away, I'm blind, so I can't do I can't be, I can't achieve. He stepped into his fullness of life. And his power, his presence, was something that affected everyone there in that chapel. And this person that was writing the story talked about how he saw this man living with power and with purpose. So that is my challenge for you this week. Can you live your life with power and purpose? Accepting what life hands you, knowing your spiritual truth, and living life full out because you know that Spirit is right behind you, right within you, right around you, everywhere, making sure that you are a powerful, creative, spiritual being. And your life is wonderful if you accept it. Would you pray with me? There is one power, one presence that is all around us, that is the very life we breathe, the breath we have that beats our hearts. And when we recognize this, we are one with it. And in that unity of oneness, there is power, there is poise, there is purpose. And as we live our lives this week, I know that each one of us here is united with that power and purpose of Spirit. We are animated by it. It gives us our very life. And in that life, we do what the world needs. We be the peace we want. We be the joy of life. We be the expression of the divine that this world needs. And so, I am grateful for knowing that we are each sourced with the power of Spirit each and every day. And we live in that truth. And it's in gratitude that I release my word, knowing it is accomplished. And together we say, and so it is.